I wish that I had decided to make this video under happier circumstances. Hi guys, my name is Joe and welcome to my channel, Fighting Words, the Martial Arts Library. On this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts related subjects. The subject of today's review is Shito-Ryu Karate, written in 1971 by Fumio Demura. Now, part of the reason I'm reviewing this, actually the reason I'm reviewing this week is because Mr. Demura passed away earlier this week. This isn't the sort of channel where I have enough information available or enough resources to make a proper tribute. As some background on the author, he probably is most famous as the stunt double for Pat Morita in the Karate Kid movies. He authored several books, many on Kobudo, which is traditional Okinawan weaponry. The reason I decided to go with this book is because I have the collected works of his first 5 books, and that's over 640 pages long, and I haven't had time to get through that. And his other book, Advanced Nunchaku, I decided not to do until I completed the other books. It has like the fundamental Nunchaku book. I would like to say that Mr. Demura, I have no personal connection to him. I don't study his style, or at least formally or anything like that. He's one of the first martial art names that I knew that wasn't, primarily a movie star like, Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee. And I do remember reading an interview where he talked about moving to the United States, not being able to speak English and getting so frustrated he was actually brought to tears, but then learning how to speak English by watching TV. And I appreciated the loneliness and frustration that he had to go through, and also his determination and his resourcefulness, and sticking it out and ultimately becoming a success. On to the book. One thing I should say about the book overall is that it's less than 100 pages. It's only on the basics of karate. There's nothing on kata, which is the solo forms. There's nothing on kumite, which is the sparring aspect, and there is nothing on any self-defense movements. What we do get are things like blocks, strikes, kicks, stances. The book begins with a sort of an intro where he discusses how, and again, this is back in 1971, how karate has been perceived by the public as something that's sort of cult-like and all about, smashing bricks and boards with your fists. And he says, it's not really about that. It is a physical art. It is good for exercise, and it can be a self-defense method. And also, he emphasizes that speed is equally as important as strength, and we sort of see that theme throughout this. He will address speed and how to get faster at just little mentions throughout the book. After that, we get a very brief history of Shito-Ryu Karate, which is mostly the history of Kinwa Mabuni, who is the founder of Shito-Ryu Karate. This section is very brief. It's really only like 4 paragraphs or so, but it does give a brief overview. And following that, we move into the various striking points used in karate. There's an ample amount of photographs and descriptions on the parts of the hand and the different hand forms that are used, as well as pointing out the different parts of the forearm and the different parts of the foot that are used in striking. These are all given, their Japanese names and a translation beside it, things like Ippon Nukite. Things like Haito and Shuto. One thing to note in the striking points section is that he will show what I've heard referred to as the Okinawan fist. And that includes a photograph where we can see that the index finger is left sort of relaxed as the thumb goes across it, as compared to a normal fist where it would be rolled underneath. And at least for the hand strikes, he also demonstrates them on his demo dummy. I guess technically in uke. Following that is a brief chart showing the weak points of the human body. Now, it's, as you can see here, it's mostly just a silhouette with, you know, some dots leading to various points, and, you know, the part of the anatomy that gets named. After that, we get into a chapter on stance. Now, unlike the chapter on the striking points, this does not include immediately the translation of the stance. It'll give the Japanese name, but unlike the point on strikes and some of the following chapters, you don't get Nekoashi Dachi cat foot stance. You don't get that. However, it's sort of worked into some of the descriptions. So I think that's a little bit helpful. Following that, we get into strikes. And these are the upper body strikes. We get, you know, a number of your classic, you know, karate style strikes with, you know, with Morote Zuki, Shuto, all that. Following that, we get into kicks. Now, unlike with the upper body strikes chapter, once it gets to the kicks, it actually shows applications of the various kicks. And one thing that stood out to me is that it shows multiple applications for the stomp, a few different variations of it. The final chapter is on blocks, and I think this is one of the highlights of the book because it shows the blocks from multiple angles. It also gives the application of those blocks. One thing I have to say, it's sort of a point of contention for me. He's giving what are common definitions of the techniques at the time without giving perhaps linguistically accurate translations. For instance, Gedan Barai is translated as a downward block. It literally translates more as lower level sweep. He is not alone in this. This is very standard. He even continues today. For instance, the use of the term uke for most of the blocks actually most closely translates as to receive, and that might change how one thinks of applying those techniques. Again, this is very standard at the time, and again, still continues through this day, but it is something that I noticed because I don't speak Japanese, but I speak martial arts. So, you know, when Otoshi Hijiate is downward elbows, I'm like, that's dropping elbow strike. You know, just little things. As far as the pros go, I do think that this is a really good basics primer. I would say that the standout chapters, as I mentioned, are the chapter on blocks, because again, it shows the techniques from multiple angles, things that were not always done at the time. I think it helps the reader better visualize the path of the technique. And I also think the section on striking surfaces, even though some of the more exotic ones don't get used a lot in the standard practice of karate, I think it's good to include them so that as a karate practitioner, the reader can sort of explore, you know, okay, I can do this movement with a simple closed fist. What if I decided to do it with an extended knuckle fist? How would that change things? So I appreciate that that was added in there. As far as the cons go, this is actually sort of a backhanded compliment, but it's too short. You know, if my major complaint about the book is that there's not enough of it, it's pretty good. Looking at this book and comparing it to some of the contemporary books, for instance, books by Masoyama from Kyokushin or Nakayama from Shotokan, this book would have made up perhaps a third of their books. I do not fault the author for this. This was published by Ohara Publishing, same guys who did Black Belt Magazine. I think that's no longer technically accurate. I don't think Ohara exists as a publishing company anymore. But they were not known for doing books of great length. You know, most of theirs clock in at, you know, under or right around 100 pages or so. And I would be very curious to see how Mr. Demura would have, what he would have done if he'd been allowed to publish a 300-page book. Another thing that detracts from this slightly is that there's sort of an inconsistency in the format. For instance, the chapter on blocking is the only chapter where we get multiple angles of a technique. And as I mentioned, we don't get the name in parentheses in the stance chapter of the stances, whereas we get that throughout the rest of the book with the different techniques. As far as recommendations go, if you are a beginner to karate, I think this is a solid primer. I think if you can find it for under $10, which you most likely will, because it's probably been out of print for several years now. If you check out your secondhand bookstores or some of the secondhand sellers online, I think that there's a good chance you can find it for under $10. And I think that, again, if you're new, a lot of the ideas that are presented here will be very useful for a beginner. You know, if you're like me and you're sort of a completionist, you know, I've got his Kobudo books, why wouldn't I want his karate book? So yeah, if you are one of those that looks for specific authors to really collect all their works, this is by Mr. Demura. Again, I wish that I had written this review under happier circumstances. I know I'm repeating myself. I have no personal connection to Mr. Demura, but just reading that one interview, he really impressed me with his determination. And reading his material, he really does seem to have an eye for detail when it comes to techniques. My thoughts go out to his friends and family. That's all I got for this week. And if you would like to support the channel, I have a Ko-fi account that you can donate to, and leave me suggestions if you donate. I might get to your book. Thank you.